It's great to be here, the 10th anniversary of CGD, with Nancy, with this wonderful panel, and each one of you I know as a friend and I admire so much. I won't go into the details. But Nancy, I think, and your team, you succeeded with something really wonderful. CGD is both a think tank and an action tank, and I was very happy to be associated with it in various ways. I mean, just a few thoughts to start, and I think Nancy said it already, but the transformation of the world economy is really amazing. And when I reread some of the literature only 10 years ago, actually it came as a surprise to many people. There's a very good book on growth theory called The Mystery of Economic Growth by Elhanan Helpman, one of the leading growth theorists in the world. And you know, less than 10 years ago, he was saying the world is still diverging. Rich countries, poor countries, very little in the middle. And it's true that when you look at the data, until the early 90s, that was the case. The whole post-war period, despite the convergence presumption that one gets from neoclassical growth theory, the world was in fact diverging. Per capita income growth in the developing world as a whole, on average, was lower than in the advanced economies. Asia picked up already somewhat earlier, but the emerging markets and developing countries as a whole were diverging. And now, for the last 20 years roughly, we really have a process of convergence that is accelerating. The crisis has made, the financial crisis made it very obvious, but the acceleration is proceeding, and I think it's durable. It is true that cycles are still correlated. I don't think there's a complete decoupling. And on the whole coupling and decoupling debate, I think the message is that trends have decoupled, that there's a very significant and sustained gap in the trend growth rates, but cycles around the trends are still correlated. We even see it, I think, in the last few weeks. There's an overall slowdown in the world economy everywhere, including in China and India, but that doesn't mean that the trends are close to one another. I think in terms of global governance, you know, it has the obvious implication that interdependence has increased in that sense, and that nothing can really be done anymore in terms of global cooperation without the major emerging markets. There is the challenge of keeping the least developed countries and the small countries involved in the process, while while China, India, Brazil, Mexico, and so on are the big players. Nonetheless, there are 172 countries that are outside the G20, and I think in terms of governance, one of the big challenges is to take advantage of the G20's ability to propose, to take initiatives, to move the agenda forward, but then legitimize it and embed it in the legal, universal, and more inclusive international institutions that we have. And overall, I would say, while less than perfect, the way the G20 has interacted, particularly with the IMF, has actually been very positive. The G20 has not tried to supplant the IMF or the World Bank. It has, it has worked with these institutions, and I think one should go further in that direction. I have actually a concrete proposal, but I don't want to make it right now, in terms of how to move that forward. Where I think there's more of a challenge, and where I hope more vigor can be injected into the process, is really on the side of the United Nations and how the United Nations comes into that whole process. It remains a big question. The United Nations has a governance structure which is more problematic than the Bretton Woods institution because there's no weighted voting. But on many issues, not just humanitarian issues, but on climate, on the actions towards the least developed countries, I do believe the United Nations retains a great degree of legitimacy. I know when I was working under Ernesto's direction on the Global Public Goods panel, we had a lot of proposals, a lot of brainstorming on that, but nothing much has happened on that front. And I think that more than the G20 per se and the interaction with Bretton Woods, I think remains a major challenge.